The World Bank predicted a massive reduction of 20% in remittance flows by 2021 at the start of the pandemic. But 6 months on, the projected decline has now been revised, defying expectations. The financial institution now estimates that the amount of money migrant workers will send home will shrink by 14%. We're joined via Zoom by the co-founder and chairman of global digital money transfer firm Azimo, Michael Kent, to discuss this. Now, thank you very much, Mr. Kent. Now, how has COVID-19 been for fintech firms across Africa?
So I think it's really been a story of two halves. I think, like all businesses, fintech firms have had to find new ways of doing things in a very difficult situation. We've been locked down here in London, just as we've been locked down all over the world. So, we have team members and staff working from home. We've had to find new ways of working on Zoom, and we've been struggling to manage under difficult circumstances. I think on the upside, it's for us as a business, it's been very good. And I would swap it in a heartbeat for no pandemic. I don't like the situation that we've been in. But if you think of our business, we're really providing a much faster and cheaper alternative to the high street brands, people like Western Union and MoneyGram. And actually, that what's happened in the pandemic has really accelerated people coming onto our platform and starting to use it. So yeah, it's definitely been tough times, but certainly for fintech firms, I think you've seen an acceleration of the move towards digital. And we're not alone. The Amazons of this world who are doing a similar thing for retail have also done very well. So yeah, it's tough times, but it also has maybe a positive impact on fintech.
Now, what do you make of the World Bank report on the impact of COVID-19 as far as your fintech is concerned?
Well, I think it's really interesting. So the World Bank have said originally, as you pointed out when you introduced the segment, originally the World Bank thought things were going to be a lot worse. So they were saying there was going to be a 20% decline in remittances this year. They've revised that to say it's going to be a 7% decline this year and then a 7% decline next year. So it's obviously the impact is a lot smaller. I think it's worrying. It's a big impact or a slightly less big impact. It's always a worrying trend. I think the interesting thing that I see, and when I talk to our customers, and we have millions of customers who are sending billions of dollars back home, when I talk to them, they're very adamant that the money that they're sending is essential, and they will do whatever they can to make sure that they can continue to save money and send it back home. So I think often when the World Bank or economists look at this sector, they sort of take GDP and the other measures of an economy, and they sort of feed those into their model, and they get a different result to if you actually talk to the people who are sending the money and you realize just how important this money is, just what a huge impact it makes in the places that receive those money to the people who receive those monies. And I think that sometimes doesn't get factored into the model. So I'm actually pretty optimistic, and I think actually probably you will see the World Bank revise this model again, and the impact won't be quite as bad as they say. But yeah, it's definitely worrying times. It's hard times for everyone. And I think probably like most places in the world, in Europe, which is where we operate, we haven't seen the full impact on the economic side of the pandemic yet. We expect this to play out for at least another 18 months, maybe even 2 years.
But I'm sure you'd appreciate that the World Bank's projection really was based on some science, because you'd expect that if people are locked down and they are not earning as much, they can't send as much. But of course, like you pointed out, there's a segment of the population that, yes, they may not be earning much, but they'll still want to try and send money down because they believe it's important.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's a scientific model, and I think the one thing is that most models are ultimately are not a true reflection of reality. I think it's absolutely, and I'm not arguing with the fact that things are going to get worse. I think they're pretty bad at the moment, and they're certainly going to get worse. What I do think isn't always factored into these economic models is just how important remittances are, and the other thing I guess you've seen, and certainly in Europe you see this. not that many people have lost their jobs, not that many people have actually have been impacted economically yet. It's coming for sure, and people are feeling it. But at the moment, we're in a quite lucky situation, certainly in the big economies in the UK or Germany, France, Spain, Italy, where yes, some people have been impacted in terms of the employment, but the government have really stepped in with huge amounts of fiscal stimulus. There are big schemes being run by governments to try and keep people in jobs, to try and keep people earning, and that's very different to previous crises where government haven't really taken an active role. In Europe, at least, I think there's been a lot of stuff that's been done to try and support people's incomes. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right. The model is based on science. I think probably the science doesn't take into account the fact that remittances are much more important than other flows of money. But yeah, there's no arguing with the fact that things are going to be bad, and we're always focused on how can we get the cost down for our customers so more of the money goes where it's needed the most.
Essentially, science doesn't have emotions. But what are your predictions as far as the African fintech ecosystem post-COVID is concerned? Do you think we're going to ride this wave, or it's going to come crashing anytime soon?
So in my book, I think what the pandemic has really done is just accelerate a trend that everyone saw was coming, but was maybe questioning the speed of arrival. So I think you're seeing people use digital ways of buying things, digital ways of managing their money. You're seeing people receive money on mobile phones. You're seeing digital has become a bigger and bigger part of our lives. We wouldn't be having this conversation in the way that we're having it now a few years ago. And if you look at, the adoption of Zoom, the adoption of WhatsApp, the adoption of some of the online retailers, the adoption of neobanks and fintech, the adoption of people like, Asimo to send money overseas, that is, and the fact that everyone's been locked down and not been able to get out has just accelerated that trend. And it's a one-way street. Once you start using these services and you find out it's much cheaper and it's much faster and it's much easier, then you don't go back. So I think we will look back, and when we have our grandchildren on our knee and talk about the crazy year that 2020 was, I think one of the positive things, and there won't be many, but one of the positive things that we'll be able to say is the acceleration of technology really happened. And that will have transformed a lot of people's lives for years to come. And I think it will have transformed it for the better.
All right. Thank you very much, techpreneur Michael Kent.